Good morning, everybody. This is ECO419 Computable General Equilibrium Models. And this is our 5th lecture. In this lecture, we're going to look at what I call the toy model, toy general equilibrium model. This is the handout. I uploaded this handout for you. You must have seen it. So this is a very simple model with one household, one firm, one good and one factor. So the idea is to show you the simplest production economy that you can see. And the purpose here, of course, is to show you the concept of general equilibrium, all right, in another perspective. So here, remember the dual core, what I call dual core. So agents optimize and markets clear, right? So here we have two agents, one household and one firm. So they are gonna both take different decisions concerning their objectives. And then those decisions at the end are gonna be aggregated into a market structure. Okay, so they're gonna be markets where supply and demand will be determined by their decisions. And in those markets, we're gonna clear these markets to find the equilibrium prices. Then, given equilibrium prices, their consumption decisions or production decisions will be optimal, of course. All right, then we're gonna define the general equilibrium. All right. So this is the handout. It's already uploaded, but I will use my whiteboard because I think you should see the derivations as I make them. So let me now share my whiteboard with you. So you can follow the content from the handout as well. Okay. So in any model, especially for the general equilibrium models, so this is a private ownership economy with one household, one firm, one good, and one production input. Okay. So in any model like this, you first define what we call the model environment. All right, and typically, model environment has 4 elements, right? One is the demographic structure. Okay, the demographic structure. I will explain what it is. The second thing is endowments. The third thing is preferences. And finally, we have technologies. Okay, so what are these things? The demographic structure allows us to define the individuals inhabiting the economy. All right. So who are these people? How many of them are there? Is there population growth, or is population fixed? If there's population growth, what determines the fertility rate? What determines the mortality rate, etc. Right. So the demographic structure must be there because we want to know who are these people. What are their lifetimes? Sometimes we build models with infinite lives. All right. Sometimes we build models with finite lives. Okay. In some models, there are overlapping generations. In the same period, there are many people with different ages, for instance. Okay. Many people at different ages. So we want to be very specific about the demographic structure. Then, in the second part, of course, we have to define what do these people have. Okay. Is it time as a source of labor? Usually we endow these people with time, and time becomes the source of their labor supply. Is it human capital? Is it physical capital? Is it land? So what do they have even before production? All right, so that's the idea. Before production, what do these people have? Is it about innate abilities or some other components of human capital? Their health status. There could be many different endowments, but in the simplest models, at least they have time, and that time input becomes the source of their labor supply. Okay. Then notice one thing. Remember the foundations of the general equilibrium theory: methodological individualism and methodological instrumentalism, right? So once we create these individuals, we go to the individual level, right? These are people. Then, of course, we have to define objectives for them. All right. What do they want? In the demographic structure, we define their existence, right? These people exist and they populate the economy. And then they have some endowments, they have some resources, and then they're going to use these resources for some purpose, for some objective, right? So in the third part, preferences, we have to define these. We have to define these preferences. And usually we use, of course, utility functions, right? We use utility functions to define what do they want, to be specific about what are their objectives. And then, as is typical, these preferences feature some consumption goods and some other stuff that they would like to have, right? First, in some models, we have different consumption goods. In some models, in addition to consumption goods, for instance, they care about the bequest they leave for their kids. Okay? In some models, the number of kids or the fertility level becomes a part of the utility function. In some other models, you may introduce leisure. Okay, so consumption and leisure choice, as you know, is a typical preference structure that we use in economics a lot. And actually, in this model, in this toy model, we're gonna have this type of preference. So there will be consumption and there will be leisure. So in the fourth part, you have to be specific about how do you create, how do you produce these consumption goods, how do you produce this stuff that go into the utility function. Okay, so if you let's say define your utility function as a function of different consumption goods, then for each of these different goods, you have to specify a production technology. All right, so what are the inputs that you can use to produce that good, and what is the production function that maps the amount of inputs to the amount of output you can produce. All right, so as you will see in this lecture and in the other lectures in the semester, we're going to be talking about production functions or production relations, where through them we're going to transform inputs to outputs, so that there will be a firm or firms, industries that use these technologies to produce the consumption goods to serve the consumers in the market. Okay, so that's the model environment. And as you realize, I haven't talked about the market structure yet. Okay, so in principle, you can define the demographic structure by, let's say, aliens. Okay, this could be happening in Mars. So this could be an alien economy. In the alien economy, these aliens would have some endowments, okay, and they would want to do something. All right, they would want to consume something, and then they would have access to some technology. So if you can actually imagine, if you are into science fiction stories, you can actually imagine this. So, okay, these aliens live in a far away galaxy. All right, in their planet, they have some sort of a plant that they can eat, so they do agriculture there, but they also want space travel. All right, they also want to explore further galaxies to find other life forms. All right, so in their utility function, you can actually put this, let's say, tourism good. All right, Then they have technologies, of course. They have the space travel technology. There's an input to that, possibly some sort of nuclear energy, all right? So they have to produce that nuclear energy, and they have to use it. Then they use it using the production technology of space travel. They use this technology to go and explore other galaxies, all right? So you can, with the model environment, you can be very creative, all right? So that's interesting. Why is that interesting? Of course, this is not interesting because of aliens. It's interesting because with the model environment, you can study different economies. You can study socialist economies. You can study entirely free market economies. And if you put a government in it, you can study mixed economic systems where government interferes with some of the economic decisions, collect taxes, distribute these tax revenues as transfers, and etc. All right. So you can do many different stuff as long as you define your model environment, because model environment is kind of the objective setup. All right. So regardless of whether you're a socialist economy or a liberal economy, you still have people there. They still have endowments, and they still have preferences and technologies. All right. So this economy has. So imagine one thing. So let's say one day there is a socialist revolution in a country. Then after that socialist revolution, production technology does not change instantly, right? So production technology is already there. And of course, if you endogenize technology, right? If you make some further assumptions, if you enrich your story with endogenous technological progress, then of course, which type of economic system you live in matters a lot for the future. But instantly, if you take demographic structure, endowments, preference, and technologies as given, then you can build on this model environment to define different types of economies. Again, a socialist economy could be studied, a centrally planned economy, not necessarily a socialist economy, but a centrally planned economy can be studied, a purely libertarian economy with 100% free markets without any regulation could be studied, and mixed systems that are much more realistic, of course, could be studied in this system as well. So for this reason, after the model environment, you discuss market and ownership structures. Okay. So the idea is that who owns the firm? So basically, the important part is that, all right? In the ownership structure, you specify if there are firms who own them, and in the market structure, you're going to specify whether this market is a monopoly, an oligopoly, a perfectly competitive market, a monopolistically competitive market. So what type of market structure is there? Okay, how many firms are there? Which agents are price takers? Which agents are price setters? Okay, so you have to talk about the microeconomic foundations of that particular market structure, and then you're gonna tell me who owns what. Okay, which type of households or what fraction of households own the firms in one particular industry, and who owns the firms in the other industry, etc. Okay, now after you do that, after you discuss, you specify market structures and owner structures, then you can define the decision problems. Okay, the decision problems, usually utility maximization, cost minimization, or profit maximization, right? But there could be, I mean, of course, depending on your model, there could be different types of agents that take different decisions. For instance, if you have a central bank in that model, if the central bank has a loss function, depending on the deviation of the actual inflation rate from the target, then the central bank, of course, will want to minimize that loss function, and it will try to make actual inflation closer to the target inflation, right? So there could be many different problems, but in the simplest models, at least with one household, we have utility maximization. With one firm, we have either cost minimization or profit maximization. Then, after that, you define the general equilibrium. Okay, so that's the flow of logic. All right. First, model environment. Again, model environment is kind of fixed. Okay, model environment is given. Your institutions, your politics do not necessarily change that. Okay, because in the simplest models, of course there are richer models, but in the simplest models, preferences are stable and their technologies are stable and their endowments are given and democratic structure is given. Okay, then you talk about market and ownership structures. You talk about whether you're in a socialist economy, in a liberal economy, in a mixed economic system. Is there a government or not? Which particular competitive pressure is in one market, whether it is a monopoly or a monopolistic competitive sector, or whether it is perfect competition, etc., etc. Then who owns what? What do these firm owners do, etc. Then you can define decision problems, because now you can define incomes, right? You can define income level of different people in the economy. Some people will be owning the firm, so they will have profit. If especially, of course, the market structure is not perfectly competitive, there will be excess profits. Those profits become incomes of the firm owners, right? So after the market and ownership structures, you can formally define the decision problems. You can formally define the utility maximization problems. You can formally define the firm problems. Then the solution of these decision problems will give you market demands and market supplies of different goods and different production factors. Okay? Then using these market clearing conditions, you can define the definition, you can define your general equilibrium. Okay? So that's the idea. And here, so this applies to any general equilibrium model. Okay, this logical flow applies to any general equilibrium model. And here we're going to study a model with private ownership. Okay, so it is much like a modern capitalist system, but here we have one good, one factor, one firm, and one household. Okay. For instance, in our earlier model, we have H by N, right? H by N system. It was H by N. Now we have 1 by 1, 1 by 1 by 1. Okay? So let me stop here. Let me pause here. And if you have questions, I can respond to them about all this. We have 4 minutes for discussion. Otherwise, let's take a break. Sorry, let's take a break, and then after the break, I'm going to show you the model. So it is all very elementary, of course, because this is again a toy model. But the logic is the same. So if you get this logic, then you can apply the same to other models that you will see, or in your exams or in your homework, you can see similar stuff. So I am waiting for inputs. Otherwise, we're gonna take a break and let's meet at 9:50 or something. Abdullah, bir şey mi söyleyeceksin?
Yok hocam, söylemiyorum.
İyi.
Vazgeçtim.
Okay. If you have no inputs, let's meet at 9:50. Okay. And then we're gonna study this model. So you will see the first general equilibrium model with production. Okay, that you will ever see. Okay, I'm ending this meeting right now, and I will see you at 9:50. Bye-bye.